Hello, everybody. It's me again, Peter Greer, and today we are going to have a blast because we are multiplying. Look at that beautiful handwriting. Decimals. Oh, yeah, it's so lovely. So, we're going to be multiplying decimals today, and we're on page 81. All right, and so if we take a look up here at the top of the page, I'm hoping this camera will even itself out so I can read it. Technical difficulties, folks. Hang on. The camera hates me for some reason. Wow, it's blowing up on everything. It's not good. Okay. Boom. How about that? All right. So on the top of page 81, it says multiplying decimals. To multiply decimals, multiply the two numbers the same way you would whole numbers. Then count the number of decimals places in both numbers you are multiplying. Decimal places are to the right of the decimal point. Put the total number of places in your answer. So I hate the way they describe that. Of course, I always hate the way they do things in these books. But let's take a look at the very first problem, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, here's the key. When you're multiplying, it doesn't matter what order you put the numbers in. All that matters is that you get your multiplication correct. All right? You don't have to write the numbers point under point. You don't have to worry about too much more than just making sure that you get your multiplication correct first and foremost. And then secondly, the next thing you want to worry about are the decimal places. All right? So like if you look here, out of the entire answer, okay, out of both problems, there are two decimal spaces moved over to the left, okay? So 1, 2. And in the answer, 1, 2. All right? That's going to be the key to making sure that you have the decimal in the right place when you're multiplying. All right? Let me just show you a couple of things really fast. So if you look here, without even answering the math problem, I know that the decimal is going to go two places because 1, 2. Two decimal places. So I know that no matter what my answer is, there's going to be two spaces and then the decimal. If I look at this one, without doing the problem, I know there's going to be one space over where the decimal will be because 1, right? You move over one space, it's going to be one place for the decimal. And I know that sounds awkward and weird, but let's take a look at this one. Now, it's a big problem, right? Remember, no matter how big the number is, the steps stay the same. And I know that without even doing any work on this problem, that there's going to be, the decimal is going to be moved 5 spaces over. You know why? Because here, 1, 2, right? So that's 2 decimal spaces already. And then here, it's 1, 2, 3. So the 3 decimal spaces plus the 2 decimal spaces equals 5 decimal spaces, which means no matter what this answer is, we're going to move the decimal over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And as we work out the problems, you'll see what I'm talking about. But just understand that the number of decimals that decimal spaces from the end here is a big deal when you're multiplying. Okay? So let's start out simple and start with our first problem, which is 4 3600 times 2. So we're on page 81, and we're doing example 1. So the problem is 4 3600 times 2. So it looks like this, right? And we're just going to write the problem so that we can do our multiplication, okay? So we're going to write it out, 4 3600 times 2. I'm not worried about point under point. I'm not worried about where the decimal is right now as far as when we're lining up the problem. You simply write it like you would any other multiplication problem, okay? From there we do our multiplication. 2 times 6 is 12. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1, 7. 2 times 4 is 8. So far we have our multiplication correct. Now where do we put that gosh darn decimal? Well, we're going to take a look. From the back, it's 2 spaces over. So from the back here, we're going to go 2 spaces over. There goes my decimal. Your answer is 8 72 hundredths. Let's take a look at number 1, row 1. Come on. That usually helps sometimes. I don't know why it's doing that. But anyway. Okay. So number 1, it's 3. The first one in row 1 is 3 8/10 times 4. Okay, and they already put it on top and bottom for already, right? So here we go. 3 8/10 times 4. So 8 times 4 is 32. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 3 is 15. So now we have 152. Where does that darn decimal point go? Well, let's take a look. From the back here, we move 1 space over. So from the back of the 2, we're going to move 1 space over. And we put it right there. Your answer is 15 2/10. Let's take a look at one of the problems in row 2. That looks like a fun one. So row 2, the very first problem, 41 times 3 hundredths. Okay? So there we go, 41 times 3 hundredths. All right, let's do it. So 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 4 is 12. Right? And we're just going to bring that 1 down, aren't we? And we don't have to do anything with the zeros. So our answer is 123. Where does that darn decimal go? Well, there's no decimal moving up here, so that's fine. But there is some decimal movement down here. 1, 2. So from the back, we're going to move 1, 2. So our answer is 1 23 hundredths. 1, 2, 3. All right, let's move on to something a little harder. So let's look at row 5, and I choose you. So row 5, and we are the third one in row 5. And we're going to work on, the problem is 44 7/10 times 30. Okay? So there we go. Now, the tricky part here when you're dealing with something like 30 or, a number that's in the tens place, so 30, 40, 50, 60, is what do you do with this 0? Now, you can just do your multiplication and 0, 7 times 0 is 0, 4 times 0 is 0, 4 times 0 is 0. You could do it that way, but really you can just kind of move everything over 1. And I do that by putting a little x, because 0 times everything is just going to be 0. I put an x to move it straight over and start with the 3, okay? So 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 2 is 14. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 1 is 13. And there you have it. So the x, some people use x's, some people use zeros. But essentially, let's figure out where that darn decimal point's going to go. There's 1, right? Nothing down here, so just the 1 over. So from the back, we're going to move 1 over, put the decimal there. And your answer is 1,341. So I'm going to do this for you again, but using the zero method. Which means I'm gonna add the 0 in, okay? Or, do the multiplication. So 0 times 7 is 0. 0 times 4 is 0. 0 times 4 is 0. Now, of course, we need to move over 1, right? So we put the x there and move over 1. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 2 is 14. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 1 is 13. Add them together, right? And then we're gonna, where's that decimal go? Well, we move it over 1, it's moved over 1 here, so we're gonna move it over 1 here. 1,341. I just wanted to prove to you that either way works. This just is a shortcut, so you can automatically just move on with your problem. But here is the full workout of how it's done and why it's done that way. So whatever works for you. If this is easier so that you know where to put your stuff and how to line it up for your multiplication and then the adding, do it this way. But if you know when you see a 0, you can just kind of put an x because you're just moving over 1. You can do it that way. Just understand that this x isn't, it represents pretty much a 0 or blank space, okay? Whichever works for you, do it that way. Remember, you can do whichever way it works, as long as you know for yourself you can make it work 100% of the time. Once again, through the power of magic, I found a way to give us a whole other page in a split second, right? So here what we have are 2 decimals in a multiplication problem, okay? So remember how I said if we count how many decimals, we move it, that's how many decimals. If we count how many decimals there are in both problems, that's how many decimal spaces we move it, right? That's exactly what happens here. So let's take a look. We're on page 82, and we're doing example 1. So example 2. So example number 2 is 6/100 times 4/10, right? Of course, we're going to write it the right way so that we can actually work the problem. So it looks like this. Now we can do some work, right? 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. Bring the 2 down. And then 4 times 0 is 0, right? And then this 0, we don't need to worry about that because everything's just going to be 0 and it's not going to make a difference. Now, where does that darn decimal go? Let's count how many decimal spaces there are. So here we have 2. So 1, 2. So there's 2 already, right? And then 1 more. So in total, we're moving 1, 2, 3. So for our answer, we're going to move the decimal 1, 2, 3. Your answer is 24 thousandths. Do you see how that worked? If you look here, you have 2 decimals on the top, 1, 2, and then 1 on the bottom. So it's a total of 1, 2, 3 decimals. So we're going to move this over 1, 2, 3 spaces for our answer. All right. So whatever, when you add up how many decimals you move it, whatever that is, that's how many you move it during your answer. So let's take a look at this a little further. So once again, we're on page 82. And let's take a look at row 6. And I'm just going to run through all of row 6 so that you make sure that we all understand what we're doing. So row 6, this is page 82. Our first problem is going to be 9/100 times 6/10. Okay, so there we have it. So 6 times 9, that's going to get you 54. 6 times 0 is 0, plus 5, okay, and then 6 times 0 is 0. Now, let's take a look at where that decimal goes. We have 1, 2 spaces that's moved on the top, and then another space on the bottom. So it's moved 1, 2, 3 spaces total, correct? So from the answer, we go 1, 2, 3 spaces. Your answer is 54 thousandths. Let's take a look at the next one in row 6. And that's going to be 5/100 times 7/10. Okay? So here we go. 7 times 5 is 35. 7 times 0 is 0, plus 3, it's 3, and then 7 times 0 is 0, right? Where does that decimal go? Well, on the top, we go 1, 2, and on the bottom, it's 1 more. So it's a total of 1, 2, 3 spaces. So in our answer, we move 1, 2, 3 spaces. Your answer is 35 thousandths. Let's take a look at the next one. And that looks interesting, doesn't it? So right here we have 4 thousandths times 3/10. Okay, let's see how we work it. So 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 0 is 0, plus 1, bring down that 1. 3 times 0 is 0, and 3 times 0 is 0. Where does that decimal go? On the top, we move it 1, 2, 3 spaces on the top, and then there's 1 more on the bottom. So it's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces moved, which means in our answer, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 in our answer. So your answer is 12 10,000ths. Okay. So as you see on the top, we moved it, there was 3, and then the bottom 1 more, so 3 plus 1 is 4. Some people do it that way. They say, well, it's 3 decimal spaces on the top and 1 decimal space on the bottom, so 3 plus 1 makes 4 decimal spaces for the answer. Some folks do it that way. I just like to do the counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how I do it. 3, 4. Okay? So whatever works for you. It's just like over here. Some might look at it and say, there was 2 decimal spaces moved on the top, 1 on the bottom, so it should be 3 decimal spaces moved on the answer. 2 decimal spaces moved on the top, 1 moved on the bottom, 3 total for the answer. Whatever works for you best. Either counting the loops and then doing it for your answer, or writing little tiny numbers on the side so you can do it that way as well. Whatever works for you, as long as it works 100% of the time. Let's do the last 2 in the multiplication section here. So for our next one, in row 6, just being a pain in the butt. There we go. We have 800ths times 400ths. Ta-da! All right, so let's work them out. 8 times 4 is going to get you 32. Okay. 4 times 0 is 0, plus 3. 4 times 0 is 0. Okay. Where does that darn decimal go? Well, let's count them out. For in the top part, it's 1, 2. And on the bottom, it's 1, 2. So for the answer, there should be 4, shouldn't there? It's because 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Well, what goes in here? Remember when we talked about zeros that were necessary and unnecessary? Well, this blank space needs a necessary 0. So we're just going to put a 0 in there from that blank space. Your answer is 32 10,000ths. And let's go ahead and do that last one in row 6. So that's 2,000ths times 8/10. Okay. So 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. 8 times 0 is 0. 8 times 0 is 0. Let's look at those decimals. So we can go 1, 2, 3 for the top and 1 for the bottom. So a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Or as some might say, 3 on the top, so you put a little 3. 1 on the bottom, put a little 1. And that means you should move it 4 spaces for your answer. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your answer is 16 10,000ths. Okay. Sometimes, instead of there being a multiplication symbol like this, what they'll do is they'll have the problems in parentheses like this. When you see two problems or two numbers next to each other surrounded by parentheses like this, it's the same as if they had put a multiplication sign in between them. This is the next step, like when you start getting into some pre-algebra type stuff, where they're going to start using this instead of this. I don't know if you guys remember towards the beginning of the semester where I even showed you where sometimes you won't even see this X symbol for multiplication. You'll see a dot for multiplication. It'll look like this. That is a horrible looking dot. It'll look something like that. So it'll say 61 8/10 times 4 8/10. But instead of an X, it'll be a dot. And eventually, instead of a dot, you're going to start seeing this. Because in algebra, they start using X as something else besides multiplication. And I'm not going to get into that with you, but just understand that this means multiplying 2 when there are two numbers next to each other, okay? So for example, 5 times 2, same deal, okay? 16 times 7. Okay, they both mean the same thing. 5 times 2, 5 times 2. 16 times 7, 16 times 7. 3 748 thousandths times 73. Okay? It all means multiplication because this could also mean this is the same as this. Okay, they're both the same. So on a quiz, on your test, on your GED, if you ever see something like this, don't panic. Just know, oh, they're both in parentheses. It means multiplication. All right. So let's do one of these problems with you so you can see how this works. I'm going to do number 12. This is page 83, by the way. So I'm going to do the first one on number 12, row 12. And we have 8,100 times 6,900. So it's going to look like this. But let's turn it into something we can actually work with. So okay, they both mean the same thing. It's just we can actually work with this one, can't we? So let's take a look. 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times 8. What's 9 times 8? That's going to get you 72, isn't it? 9 times 0 is 0. Bring down the 7. And then we move over to the next one, right? The 6. So I'm going to put that little X down there and move over. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 8 is 48. 6 times 0 is 0, plus 4, 48. I'm not going to do the 0 because that's not going to make a difference, right? All right. So the 9, we're going to add them together. The 9 plus, this is a 0, right? So the 9 could just come straight down. 6 plus 2 is 8. 8 plus 7 is 15. Carry the 1. 4 times 5 is 5. Where does that darn decimal go? Well, let's take a look. For the top, it's 1, 2, 2 spaces, and then 1, 2, 2 more spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. Or if you want to write 2, 2, then your answer should be 4. And so we're going to go down to our answer and move it 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So your answer is 5,589 10,000ths. That's your answer. So, as we've been doing this, remember, I put a 0 here in front of the decimal point. Up here, I did not, right? Remember when I said either one is correct? I prefer this method, but either way is fine. Okay, as long as you make sure that you've got your decimals in the right places, the zeros where they need to be, the answer in the correct places, we're fine. Whether you put the 0 in front or not, don't worry about it. Okay, I do it this way. You'll see me do it this way as well, specifically because on the GED, it might be shown differently. Okay, and on the quizzes, it might be shown differently. And on the TABE test or whatever they might give you from CCBC, you might see it differently. But either way is going to be the right way to do it, either the 0 in front or not. So that's multiplying decimals. We'll get into dividing decimals later. I'll probably make some videos on dividing decimals either tomorrow or Thursday. What I would like you guys to do, I'll send the homework in the email that I send out with the attachments for these videos. We'll do a little bit of reading stuff. I'll probably do a quick reading thing later on this afternoon. Please work and practice on your multiplication of decimals. And if you have any questions whatsoever, again, remember, email me, pgreer@ccbcmd.edu. You can text me, 410-925-3152. And you can call if necessary, okay? So that's about it. and see you soon.